The Monte Vista Hotel stood like a monolith, its towering figure casting long, dark shadows over the sleepy town beneath it. Decades of decay had turned the once grand establishment into a rotting husk. Locals whispered of hauntings, disappearances, and dark rituals performed in its depths. But tonight, it wasn't the locals gathering outside its gates. It was the government's top-secret paranormal investigation team. Ethan Graves, the team's new leader, stepped out of the black SUV and glanced at the towering structure. His breath fogged in the cold air. He had seen the file: unexplained deaths, impossible events, and a string of missing persons dating back over 80 years. Yet, standing there, it was the tangible weight of dread that struck him first. The hotel felt alive, like it was watching them. Ready for a walk in the park? Sam, his tech expert, joked, hoisting a duffel bag filled with ghost hunting equipment. Ethan managed a thin smile. If this is a park, it's the kind no one comes back from. As they approached the entrance, the old iron gates groaned like they were alive. A blast of cold wind greeted them as they entered the lobby, its opulence long lost to time. Chandeliers hung crooked, and the air was thick with the stench of mildew and something far worse, decay. "Teams spread out," Ethan ordered. "We need a full sweep of the building. Stay in pairs." The team nodded, moving cautiously into the darkness. The building groaned around them, like something lurking in the walls, watching their every move. Ethan and Sam took the east wing, the hallways lined with cracked doors and peeling wallpaper. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, and the distant sound of shuffling feet sent chills up Ethan's spine. "This place, it doesn't want us here," Sam whispered, setting up an EMF reader. The device immediately spiked into the red. "We're not alone." Suddenly, the temperature dropped. Their breaths became visible puffs in the air, and then a loud crash echoed from deeper inside the hotel. "Stay sharp," Ethan warned, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw a shadow dart across the hallway. It moved too fast, too fluid, like it wasn't bound by the laws of this world. He swallowed hard. The real nightmare was only beginning. The team's radios crackled with static, voices distorting into incomprehensible mutters. Ethan and Sam exchanged a nervous glance before pressing forward. The hallway seemed to stretch infinitely now, with each step feeling like they were wading deeper into the belly of some terrible beast. "Did you hear that?" Sam froze, his flashlight flickering. The light caught something moving up ahead, just for a second. It was tall, impossibly so, and its form flickered like a glitch in reality. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, keep your guard up." They moved cautiously toward the figure, their footsteps eerily silent on the old carpet. The oppressive silence made every small sound deafening. A low, rumbling growl filled the air, vibrating the walls. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Without warning, the figure ahead lunged forward, faster than anything human. Sam screamed, stumbling back as his flashlight beam fell onto a shadow man, its eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. It towered over them, its body seemingly made of liquid darkness. Ethan fired a shot. The bullet passed through the creature like it was made of smoke. The shadow man grinned, a twisted expression that sent a wave of cold terror through him. It advanced, arms outstretched, fingers elongating into claws. "Run!" Ethan barked, grabbing Sam's jacket and dragging him down the hallway. They sprinted, adrenaline surging as the air around them became suffocatingly cold. The shadow man's whispering laugh echoed behind them, closer with every step. They reached the end of the hall, slamming the door behind them. Sam was pale, his hands shaking violently. What the hell was that? Ethan didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the hotel was just beginning to show its true horrors. The moment the door shut behind them, silence enveloped Ethan and Sam like a suffocating shroud. The only sound was their ragged breathing. The room was pitch black, illuminated only by the faint glow of Sam's malfunctioning flashlight. Ethan gripped his radio, his knuckles white. "Team, check in. Anyone hear me?" Only static answered. Sam was still trembling, his face pale as a ghost. It was inside the walls, Ethan. That thing, whatever it was. It's like the shadows are alive here. Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. "Stay focused. We need to find the others and figure out what we're dealing with." Suddenly, the room grew colder, an icy chill that cut through their clothing and burrowed into their bones. The hair on the back of Ethan's neck stood on end, and a faint whisper began to fill the air. At first, it was too soft to make out, but it grew louder with each passing second. "What the hell is that?" Sam muttered, his eyes darting around the room. "Do you hear that?" The whispers surrounded them, circling like predators in the dark. It wasn't just one voice. It was hundreds, all speaking at once, overlapping in a chaotic symphony of madness. They were incomprehensible, but the tone was unmistakable. Anger, hatred, despair. "Get your equipment out," Ethan ordered, trying to suppress the rising fear in his chest. Sam fumbled with his EMF reader, which immediately spiked into the red. The temperature gauge dropped below freezing. Then, in the far corner of the room, something shifted. A figure, barely visible in the dim light, stood motionless, watching them. It wasn't human. It was too tall, its limbs too long, and its eyes. They glowed a faint, sickly yellow. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Sam!" The figure moved, but not like a person. It glided across the floor, as if gravity held no sway over it. Ethan raised his gun, but deep down he knew it was useless. The thing was pure malice, a predator that thrived on fear. A voice, distorted, ancient, cut through the whispers. "You shouldn't have come here." Sam's flashlight flickered and died. They were plunged into darkness. Chapter 4: The Disappearing Walls. The pitch-black void seemed to close in around them. Ethan's breath hitched as he tried to find his bearings. He pressed himself against the wall, but when his hand touched the surface, it was no longer solid. The wall was gone. Panic shot through him. "Sam! The walls! I can't feel it either." Sam cried, his voice shaky. "It's like the whole place is moving." And then, a low groan reverberated through the floor. The hotel itself seemed to be shifting, warping around them, as if it were alive and hungry. In the darkness, Ethan could feel the floor trembling beneath his feet. The whispers returned, louder, more frantic. The figure in the corner had vanished, but the feeling of being watched remained. Sam let out a strangled cry. "Ethan, look!" The floor was moving. No, it was slithering. From beneath the wood, tendrils of dark, inky substance began to crawl toward them. The hotel was no longer just a haunted building. It was transforming into something far more sinister. The tendrils snaked along the ground, seeking them out, eager to claim them. Ethan grabbed Sam's arm, pulling him away just as one of the tendrils grazed his boot. They sprinted through the blackness, their hands reaching for walls that weren't there, doors that no longer existed. The layout of the hotel had changed. "Where the hell is the exit?" Sam shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Ethan didn't know. The Monte Vista was no longer just a building. It was a labyrinth of horrors, shifting and twisting to trap them. Every turn led to more darkness, more whispers, and more fear. And somewhere in the depths of the hotel, the shadows were closing in. Ethan and Sam staggered down the endless hallway, their footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. Every door they passed seemed to lead nowhere, a cold draft creeping out from beneath the frames, but none of them offered escape. The walls, now slick and damp as though the hotel itself was breathing, seemed to pulse with life. "Sam, focus," Ethan whispered, scanning the dimly lit corridor. The walls had been shifting, but now something else had changed. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever. No matter how far they ran, the end was never in sight. Sam clutched the camera, the lens fogged and flickering in and out of focus. "This is impossible. This can't be real." "It doesn't matter what's real anymore," Ethan replied, his voice tight with fear. "We have to find a way out." As they moved forward, the temperature plummeted again. Their breaths condensed into thick clouds of vapor, swirling around them before dissolving into the dark. Then came the sound, the unmistakable scrape of nails against wood. Both men froze. From behind, something heavy and slow dragged itself across the floor. It sounded like claws, or worse. Sam turned around, his voice trembling. "Ethan." But Ethan couldn't answer. His eyes were locked on the shadows gathering at the far end of the hall. Something was moving within them, a black shape, too large, too grotesque to be human. It emerged slowly, its body low to the ground, limbs unnaturally long, stretching and curling as though they were being pulled from beneath the floorboards themselves. The thing's face, or what passed for a face, was hidden in the dark, but the eyes, they gleamed with malevolent intent, hungry and cold. "We run," Ethan whispered. Before Sam could protest, Ethan bolted, dragging him along. The corridor stretched out infinitely before them, but they sprinted, their feet pounding against the warped floor, every step echoing with the thing's pursuit. The creature let out a low, guttural hiss, the sound so deep it vibrated in their bones. The walls around them warped and began closing in, narrowing the passage as if the hotel wanted them trapped. "We're not going to make it," Sam shouted, his voice filled with panic. Ethan refused to believe it. Just keep running. But it was gaining. The thing's claws scraped ever closer, the sounds of its grotesque body dragging itself along the floor growing louder, filling the hallway with its vile presence. As the walls squeezed tighter, Ethan spotted a door at the end of the corridor. Something new, something they hadn't seen before. It was old, its wood splintered and covered in deep, jagged scratches. With a final burst of adrenaline, they dove for it. The door slammed behind them as Ethan and Sam collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. They had escaped, for now, but as the two men slowly rose to their feet, they realized their surroundings were no safer than before. They were in a small, dimly lit room, lined with shelves. Each shelf was packed with dolls, hundreds of them, their glassy eyes reflecting the weak light that filtered in through cracks in the walls. Some were old and worn, with cracked porcelain faces and tattered dresses, while others looked newer, yet equally unsettling. Sam took a shaky step forward, his gaze darting from doll to doll. Why would anyone keep these here? Ethan's stomach churned with unease. The room was too quiet, too still. It felt wrong. This place, it's playing with us. As they moved deeper into the room, the dolls seemed to shift, their eyes following them. Sam's breath caught in his throat. "Ethan, I swear, they're watching us." Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the dolls' faces twisted, their expressions warping into grotesque grins. One by one, their tiny mouths began to move, whispering in high-pitched, sing-song voices. "They're coming. They're coming." Ethan's blood ran cold. "We need to leave. Now." But before they could move, the door they had just entered slammed shut with a deafening bang, locking them in. The whispering grew louder, the dolls' eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light as their voices became a chorus of mocking laughter. Then, from behind the shelves, a figure began to emerge, a tall, thin shadow with elongated limbs. It moved unnaturally, jerking and twitching as it stepped forward, its face obscured by darkness. The thing's long, skeletal fingers reached out, brushing against the dolls as it moved, causing them to tremble and shift on their shelves. Ethan grabbed Sam's arm, his voice barely a whisper. "We have to find another way out." But the walls were closing in again, and the shadowy figure was getting closer. The laughter of the dolls filled the air, echoing in their minds, driving them to the brink of madness. "We're trapped," Sam muttered, his eyes wide with terror, and the shadow took another step closer. Ethan and Sam stumbled through the hidden passage they'd found behind one of the shelves, their hearts pounding as the echoes of the laughing dolls faded into the distance. The narrow tunnel was suffocating, the walls cold and damp to the touch, almost as if the very house was alive, breathing around them. "There has to be another way out," Ethan muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We just need to keep moving." Sam nodded, though his face was pale. His flashlight flickered, casting long, sinister shadows on the walls. Every so often, they could hear the faint sound of scratching behind them, a reminder that whatever had chased them from the doll room was still lurking, still hunting. The tunnel opened up into a larger space, a decrepit underground chamber that seemed far older than the rest of the hotel. Strange symbols were carved into the stone walls, their meaning lost to time, but radiating a malevolent energy that made Ethan's skin crawl. "What is this place?" Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know, but we need to keep going," Ethan replied, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. They moved deeper into the chamber, the air thick with a rotten stench that made it hard to breathe. Suddenly, the ground beneath them gave way with a sickening crack, and they both fell, tumbling into a pit. Ethan hit the ground with a painful thud, gasping for breath. His flashlight had shattered, leaving them in near-total darkness, except for the dim glow from Sam's flickering light. They were in a cavern now, far beneath the hotel, and from the corners of the pit came the sound of something moving, no slithering. Ethan's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. The crawlers. Out of the darkness, they emerged pale, thin creatures with twisted, elongated limbs. Their skin stretched taut over sharp bones. Their eyes were hollow, black pits, and their mouths dripped with something thick and dark. They moved quickly, scurrying along the walls like insects, their long fingers clicking against the stone. "There's too many of them," Sam yelled, his voice rising in panic. Ethan grabbed a large rock, brandishing it as a weapon, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The crawlers hissed, their movements becoming more frenzied as they closed in. One of them leaped forward, its bony fingers grazing Ethan's leg, tearing through his pants and skin. "We need to move now," Ethan shouted, pulling Sam to his feet. They ran, the crawlers at their heels, their claws scraping against the ground, getting closer with every step. Ethan's lungs burned as they raced through the narrow tunnels, dodging the creature's frantic attacks. Just as he felt a cold hand brush against his back, they burst into another chamber. They slammed the door behind them, the sound of the crawler's claws scratching at the wood, a chilling reminder of how close they had come to death. Breathless, Ethan and Sam collapsed against the door of the new room they had found themselves in, their bodies trembling from the terror of their near miss. But their relief was short-lived. The chamber they now found themselves in was worse, far worse. It was cavernous, lined with crumbling statues that seemed to watch their every move with dead, hollow eyes. The air here felt wrong, thick and heavy, as though it carried the weight of centuries of suffering. "This place, it's ancient," Sam whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Older than the hotel, Ethan scanned the room, trying to steady his breathing. "Whatever it is, we have to keep going." They took a few tentative steps forward when the temperature dropped suddenly, so sharply that their breath crystallized in the air. Then, without warning, the statues lining the walls began to shift, their stone faces distorting into grotesque grins. "What the hell?" Sam started, but his words trailed off as the sound of bones cracking and flesh stretching filled the room. From the darkness emerged something far worse than the crawlers. It stood on two legs, towering above them, its body impossibly thin and covered in skin that looked as though it had been crudely stitched together. Its face was a twisted mask of human and animal features, half man, half beast, with eyes that gleamed with a cruel intelligence. "The Skinwalker," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. The creature let out a low, guttural laugh that echoed through the chamber, its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. It spoke, but its voice wasn't its own. It shifted, mimicking Sam's voice perfectly. "Ethan, we're not getting out of here alive." Sam's eyes widened in horror. No, that's not me." The Skinwalker lunged, moving with terrifying speed. Ethan barely had time to react as the creature's long arms reached for him. He dodged, but the Skinwalker was too fast. It grabbed Sam, lifting him off the ground effortlessly, its twisted grin widening as it mocked them both with Sam's own voice. "Help me!" Sam screamed, but the sound was wrong, distorted, broken. Ethan lunged at the creature with the only weapon he had, a broken shard of stone, but it was no use. The Skinwalker flung Sam across the room, his body hitting the wall with a sickening thud. Ethan's scream died in his throat as Sam's body crumpled to the floor. Blood pooled around him, the sound of the Skinwalker's mocking laughter filling the chamber. Ethan felt his legs go weak, but fear and adrenaline pushed him forward. Sam was motionless, his eyes wide open, staring into nothingness. But there was no time to grieve. The Skinwalker shifted again, its grotesque form slithering back into the shadows, watching Ethan with predatory eyes. The air became thick with a buzzing, unnatural hum. Ethan's head throbbed as if something, or someone, was messing with his mind. His thoughts felt scattered, disoriented. Was the Skinwalker doing this, or was it something else entirely? Suddenly, the sound of voices echoed from above, faint but growing louder. Ethan's heart leaped with hope as he realized it was the rescue team. They had come for them. "Down here!" he he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He stumbled to his feet, heading toward the tunnel from which they had come. But before he could take another step, the hum grew louder, more intense, vibrating through his skull. The voices stopped abruptly. The air went cold again, colder than before. The buzzing faded, replaced by the sound of dragging footsteps. Ethan froze, his eyes widening as the team appeared at the mouth of the tunnel. But something was horribly wrong. Their faces were blank, lifeless, their bodies stiff, as though they were being controlled by unseen hands. One by one, they entered the room, but there was no light in their eyes, no recognition. It was as if they were puppets of the Skinwalker. No, 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 Ethan whispered, backing away as the team approached. Their mouths moved, but the words they spoke were garbled, distorted echoes of their former selves. Then, without warning, they all vanished. Gone. Not a trace left behind. The room was deathly silent, save for Ethan's ragged breathing. He was utterly alone. A low growl emanated from the shadows. The Skinwalker had returned, but now it wasn't alone. Ethan's heart stopped as a second figure emerged. A shadow man, tall and thin, its body nothing more than a shifting black silhouette. "Please," Ethan muttered, trembling, as the creatures circled him. The Skinwalker's grin widened, its teeth glinting like knives. And then, in one swift movement, it lunged. Ethan barely dodged the Skinwalker's attack, his body moving purely on instinct. His mind screamed at him to run, but where? The chamber was a labyrinth of death, and his legs were heavy with fear. The Shadow Man moved silently, its form twisting and bending unnaturally as it closed in on him. Its presence alone felt like a weight pressing down on Ethan, suffocating him. He stumbled backward, trying to keep both creatures in his sights. His hand brushed something cold and metallic, Sam's abandoned camera. In a split second, an idea flashed through his mind. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. Ethan grabbed the camera, fumbling with the buttons until it turned on. The screen flickered to life, casting a faint light in the oppressive darkness. The Skinwalker paused, its grotesque face twisting in confusion. "Come on, you freak," Ethan muttered under his breath, flipping the camera to night vision. Through the screen, the room looked different, darker, more distorted. The symbols carved into the walls pulsed with an eerie glow, and the creatures seemed weakened, as though the camera was revealing something they couldn't hide from. The Skinwalker hissed, recoiling from the light of the screen, its form flickering. The Shadow Man, too, seemed to waver, its silhouette distorting as it moved away. "This is it," Ethan breathed, the realization hitting him. The camera wasn't just a tool for recording, it was a weapon, a way to see what they were, truly. The creatures circled him, angry now, their movements more frantic. Ethan clicked the camera's flash, the bright light momentarily blinding the Skinwalker. It howled in agony, its body shifting and cracking, unable to maintain its form under the scrutiny of the lens. The Shadow Man, too, recoiled, its body thinning into a wisp of smoke. Ethan's heart raced. He had an opening. He ran toward the tunnel, the camera still in hand, flashing it at every shadow that moved. The creatures screeched in protest, but they couldn't touch him, not while he had this light. Bursting through the narrow passageway, Ethan stumbled into the hotel lobby, breathless and shaking. The atmosphere felt lighter now, though the eerie silence remained. He stepped outside into the cold night air, the wind howling through the abandoned streets. The hotel loomed behind him like a dark sentinel, but it no longer felt suffocating. It was over, at least for now. Ethan collapsed on the ground, staring up at the moonlit sky. He had survived, barely, but as the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the night, he knew one thing for certain. The horrors of the Monte Vista Hotel were far from over.